focus groups will be used as the exploratory stage, qualitative first, moving into a quantitative study later. So the qualitative generates the questions for your quantitative study later. It can also be used to interpret quantitative data. So a mixed method can also be the other way around. So you do a quantitative study and then you want to know why. And then you're presenting the findings of your quantitative to the focus group and you're saying, why could this be? Why do you think we would have found this result? And so you're starting to use the focus group to interpret the quantitative data. It's more cost-effective, obviously, than interviews. You're putting 10 people into an interview setting at one time. Okay, the cons are that it's often influenced by the group chemistry, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges with focus groups. You can't have one individual dominating the conversation, and that's why your group composition is very important. You need to ensure that you're not going to have 5 people sitting there listening to one person. That's not a focus group. So that chemistry really can derail your focus groups. You need to have a well-trained moderator. As I say, you can't just go in and do these on your own without some kind of training or preparation. Scheduling and venue decisions are much more complicated. Ideally, if you look at all your, have a look at, just put focus group into YouTube, for example, you'll see most focus groups have this one-way glass setting, so the client, usually the sponsor, can get to observe the focus group. And some of them have this little bubble that your focus group sit in, and people can walk all around, so they can be checking out your facial expressions and everything. That's the ideal setting for a focus group. A lot of focus groups obviously don't happen like that. They happen in a lecture room or in a seminar room in a university without that kind of technology. But getting the right people together. Any of you who have done focus groups before will know, people say, yes, I'm coming, you've got the perfect mix, you've set up your focus group so that you've got everyone you need, and 2 of the people don't pitch. And then there's the issue of, if you invite 10 when you only need 8, what do you do with the other 2 if they arrive? So there's those sort of issues that are much more complicated with focus groups. As I say, they don't have a very good reputation. If you do focus groups and you're trying to publish, you really have to be very sure about your methodology. You've got to be very rigorous, and I know that's very positivist, but about how you do your focus groups, about the transparency, about what was done, how it was done, why it was done. You've got a bigger hurdle to get over to get that published. And they're not representative. You can't generalize data from focus groups. All right, observation, the third one. This is basically, as it sounds, observing. So it's a systematic recording of observations that can be narrative, so it can be written stuff. It can be audio, which is translated into written, or it can be numeric. Observation is also about counting. So, for example, you might be a marketer and you want to know when a customer walks into a store, how long do they spend at the shelf, where do they look, how many products do they look at, how many do they pick up. That would just be a pure counting exercise, so it can be numerative. It can be unobtrusive or obtrusive. Unobtrusive is where the, I don't know what you call them in observation, the person you're observing. They're not a respondent and they're not really a participant, but that person doesn't know that you're there. That's unobtrusive. So if you were in a supermarket, you would be hiding away, or you would use a digital means like a camera to track what that customer was doing. Whereas obviously obtrusive is observation where the customer or the person knows that you're observing them. And that brings in a whole lot of problems in that they may be behaving differently because they know they're being observed. You can get to the point where they get over that, but it's quite difficult to know when they are over it and when they're playing up to being observed. They can be collected manually or electronically. As students, you may at some stage have been made to go and do some dreadful counting exercise where you manually tick boxes. They looked at this car and they did that, and that's a manual exercise. A lot nowadays is being done electronically. We can look at click-through rates on a website, for example. Again, looking at exactly the same sort of thing. How long does someone spend on the page? Which icons do they click through to? Which pages do they go through to? How long do they spend on the page, etc.? And we can do that electronically. They can be natural or controlled, and here I am going to contradict Mogi in that sometimes qualitative research is done in a controlled environment. In other words, for example, Unilever at their head office have a test site, basically, where they have a store and they get consumers in very often to see how they walk through this test store, what they look at, which of their brands they look at. They'll try out new packages, for example, that haven't been launched into the market and see what consumers do with the package. Do they even look at it? Do they pick it up? What questions do they ask if there's somebody there? So that's actually a control. It's almost an experimental design, but you're observing what they're doing. Where are we? Participant and observers. Now, this is particularly relevant for ethnography, because in ethnography, we can be a pure observer. Okay, let's say there's a famous, and I forget who the author is, but there's a famous study that was done on Harley Davidsons. Now, if you just watched what people did in terms of a Harley Davidson, you would be doing pure observation. But you could be a participant observer. Okay, in other words, you could have a Harley Davidson and observe what people do. Or you can be, and they call it an observer participant, and that is where you actually get involved in the Harley Davidson group. Now, I don't know if any of you own or know anybody who owns a Harley Davidson, but they're quite a unique group of people. Before I offend anybody, is there anyone who owns a Harley Davidson? Okay. They're quite a unique group of people. And so to get in, it's not just about owning a Harley Davidson. So to be an observer participant, you'd actually have to get into that group. And then you're not just observing. You'd be interviewing, you'd be doing other sorts of things in your ethnography, but you'd also be reflecting. And so a lot of issues to do with the observation is that, are we observing other people entirely? In other words, we're impartial, we're not involved. Or are we actually a participant observer, where we're involved in the reflecting on? A lot of the data is coming from our own perceptions. And that's a very important data source for ethnography. The issue of privacy, and I actually want to raise this here. The books that I've looked at in terms of observation say that if the observation is being done in a public area, in other words, whatever the person is doing is public, then you don't have to get their permission to use it. Now, whether that would fly with our ethical clearance committee, I actually don't know. And maybe it would be interesting to see that. So for example, say I get permission from Pick and Pay to one of my areas that I look at is pester power, how kids pester parents for things. If I got permission from Pick and Pay to observe what happens in the store, so I go and park myself in the cereal aisle, that's a good one, and I stand there and pretend to be a customer, and I record what's happening behind me. You know, is it the mother or the father that's getting pestered? What are they getting pestered for? Are they having a tantrum? Are they just trolley loading? You know, what are the tactics that the kids are using? Those are things that we ask parents about, but it would be much better to watch and see what happened. Would that actually get through the Ethical Clearance Committee? Because I wouldn't be asking their permission to record them. As I say, the book says as long as they're doing it in public, it's fine. What you can't do is record anything that's not public. So the example they give is you can't go into a dressing room and see how people try on outfits. Well, to me, that's pretty obvious. But I've seen research published where they have given a video recorder to somebody in the family, and they've said, record every meal, because they want to see how people interact as a family at a meal. Now, that's not in public, that's in private. Again, it would be interesting to see if we could get something like that through ethical clearance. Okay, so those are privacy issues. Some special forms of observation. As I said, ethnography involves a lot of different kinds of observation, often with interviews and often with the participation themselves. And then there's content analysis, and actually I think I've given you, I've got 2 other slides here. The characteristics of ethnography, and these come from Julie Tinston directly. She says that with ethnography, you've got multiple sources. I've mentioned that already. That you're recording everyday experiences. Okay, so you're understanding how people operate every day. What is it like to be part of that group? I read a really interesting study a little while ago on marketing tribes. So tribes of people as opposed to segments, tribes. Tribes are much more coherent. They have a kind of rule of behavior the codes of how you behave within a tribe. Emerging themes. Themes emerge out of ethnographic data. Okay, you generally don't go in with a preconceived idea of what you're looking for. You're looking for those emergent themes. It happens, as you said, in a natural setting, and it's very important to understand the cultural space, okay, that environment within which you're collecting this data. And then a new thing is ethnography. Okay, we have tribes of people, we have communities of people in social networks, understanding them. Now, this you can do from your office. You can have an air-conditioned office and never go out, and you can understand these communities. You can become part of them. The ethics involved in this is very, very important. If you're going to be part of a chat room and you're going to use that for research, you need to identify that that's who you are and that's what you're there for. But that could make it difficult, obviously, to collect that data. But I think that's really important, particularly with ethnography. Content analysis, data sources. Now, I'm not talking about the actual how do you analyze the data. Sean's going to talk to you about that later. To me, this is such an exciting area for qualitative research. There is so much that is available that we can analyze that's there. It's all free data sitting out there. We can analyze business reports. What are businesses putting into their business reports? What are the messages that are coming out of them? My area, another area that I'm interested in is green marketing. To what extent is the green agenda reflected in business reports? Most of your business reports are available, okay, publicly. So let's go and have a look at those. Let's analyze to what extent they're adopting a green agenda. You could look at it from any angle. Look at all your big HR issues. You know, to what extent is diversity actually coming through in the reports of companies? We can look at adverts. I've got a master's student at the moment who's analyzing food adverts to see the extent to which unhealthy foods are being advertised. With the pending legislation that's coming through, that's going to ban all advertising of anything to do with fast foods, junk foods, you know, to what extent is that going to be a problem? So we can analyze stuff that's there, verbal adverts, written, or, you know, print or TV. He's looking at TV ads. Brochures. What do we say in brochures? What's the messages that come through? What's the readability? There's some fantastic software out there that just measures readability. I don't know if you heard, it was on the East Coast the other day, they were talking about how the average person coming out of a South African school only has a readability of a grade 7 or something. Now, there are measures of those, that readability. How many of you have opened what do you call those scripts that you get inside medicine boxes? You know, for whatever. And understood anything in there? Now, who's that for? Is it for the customer, which it should be? I'm the one who has to get it out and try and work out whether I should have this or give this to my child, or I'm going to die from the side effects. It's not readable. Is it for the pharmacist? Well, if it's for the pharmacist, don't put it in the box, because I don't never take the box to the pharmacy if something goes wrong. So, you know, something like that. What is the medical company trying to communicate through those pieces of paper in the medical boxes? Let's analyze it. Blogs. Look at how many blogs there are out there. That's rich with data. There's so much data there. What are people talking about? From a marketing perspective, what are they saying about the brands? What is the sentiment towards our brands? There's a lovely site called socialmention.com. Any of you in marketing? Socialmention.com collects data on brands and what people are saying. It tells you sentiments, it tells you positive and negative scores. You can actually go in and find it, whether it's a Facebook or a Twitter tweet or whatever, what people are saying about particular brands. There's a depth of information there. Sorry, no, you will have to get, because I can get really stuck on this stuff. Social media comments. Okay, just the comments. Look at TripAdvisor or Booking.com, where every single hotel, every tour operator has comments under them. Analyze those. What are they saying? Again, lots of information. Interview scripts, obviously we use content analysis. We can use content analysis for that. Mission statements, corporate communications, training manuals. How readable are they? How user-friendly are they? Policies in organizations, cartoon analysis, journal analysis. A couple of my colleagues have done journal analyses where they've gone in and looked at what are the themes that are being published in the journals. Where are their emphases? Who's publishing? Who are the lead authors? Lots there as well. User-generated content, consumers putting stuff out there. There's a very famous Starbucks YouTube video that was produced by a consumer. What do organizations do with that? How can we use that data that's being put out there by consumers? How can we understand what their sentiments are towards the brand? So as I say, it's all free. And how to analyze that, Sean will chat to you about. All right, just quickly observations. Respondents are, in most cases, acting naturally. It doesn't rely on the willingness or the ability of the participants, but there are these ethical issues. Research bias is eliminated. You haven't got an interviewer involved there. It helps increase confidence in questionnaire data, so you can use it to interpret. You can't ask the why. You can see what they're doing. You can see what they're saying, but you can't actually ask why. It is time-consuming. Don't be fooled. I did a journal analysis. My word, it took forever. You're talking about thousands of pages of data, but there's also some cool software we'll talk about just now. And it's restricted, as I say, mostly to the public domain, if you can get it past your ethical clearance. Lastly, researchers' responsibility is to your participant first. And I think this is very important for qualitative research. You are responsible to the participant. With qualitative research, often we're delving into really sensitive issues. You can't just delve and say, thanks for the research, cheers, I'm off. I've left you in a heap of tears, or whatever. Sorry, I'm done. You can't do that. You owe it to your participants. You have a responsibility to them. You should be prepared. You should anticipate if you are going to do, if it is going to have that effect or could have, be prepared. Have people that they can be referred to if they are traumatized by the data that you're collecting. Always be ethical, be transparent in your reporting. I think Sean will chat to you about that. Make sure your research is dependable, credible, and valid, as opposed necessarily to reliability. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing your stuff. And I've also just added some things I looked at. Okay.